Good morning, everybody. My name is Andrew Van Doorn. I'm the Chief Executive of HACT, and I'm really delighted to be welcoming you today to this session as part of the Social Value Conference. In this session, we're going to be looking at and kind of keeping this theme going around being mission critical, about keeping social value real. I don't know about you, but I've found in my career working in this space of social value that often the question comes up, which is how do we know that what we are doing as people working in communities trying to drive forward impact and social value, how do we know that it's actually needed? How do we know that it's rooted in what communities want? And how do we know whether or not organizations are having an impact? And whether or not all of those commitments that are being kind of drawn together through procurement and in other ways are coming together to actually make a real impact in community. And today in this session, we're going to look at those questions. We're going to look at how do we make sure that when we talk about social value, when we use different tools to measure it, to value it, and to value impact, how do we know that we are keeping it real? How do we know that what we are doing is impactful? And how do we know that what we are doing is transformative and transforming the lives of people in communities across the country? I'm joined by a fabulous panel of people who are going to share their perspectives on that question. We're going to hear from Councillor Chris Reddy in a moment, who's the Cabinet Member for Communities and Neighbourhoods at Wigan Council. We're going to hear from Councillor Ed Pitt-Ford, who is Councillor at Westminster City Council. We're going to hear from Rhian Harris, who's the Marketing and Social Impact Manager at Datagraphic Limited. And then finally, we're also going to hear from Richard Carroll, who's the Chief Procurement Officer at Durham County Council. So a range of different perspectives, different organisations, different professionals working in this space of social value to kind of share their experiences and their thoughts about this really, really critical question of how are we keeping social value real. As we go through this conversation, I really hope you are going to participate. You're going to put some kind of comments into the chat, things that we can pick up as part of the panel and respond to any kind of thoughts that you hear as we're going through. Just put them into the chat. Any questions, put them where we will pick them up. I do hope that there is an emoji button on your screen. I'm hoping you might like to share some love or not. I don't know. With us. Good, I'm seeing the emojis come up now. We love a bit of emoji feedback, as you know, doing these kind of online conferences, whilst they're really great because they actually means that we can get to quite a lot of people and a lot of people can participate. It always feels a little bit strange when we're all sitting in our offices or our homes, kind of looking at a screen. So a bit of emoji love is always welcome, particularly on a Tuesday morning at 11:05. So that's enough from me from the introductions. First of all, we're going to hand over, I think we're going to you first, Chris, aren't we? So as I said, Chris is a councillor at Wigan Council, but he's also the Cabinet Member for Communities and Neighbourhoods. Chris.
Hello and welcome. Can I just say firstly, I think community wealth building is more important now than it ever has been before. Naturally, with budgets are tight and things are different out there. So probably my take on it really is what we can offer to contractors, to businesses, and what they can offer to communities. So I think, and I've looked at across the country at what people have done, and procurement has been more important than actually social value. And I think that's been across the piece where you've probably had a shortage of staff who just look at procuring contractors, and social value has been a bit of a sad issue. So I just wanted to share some stuff with you about what I've been working on and what we've been working on at Wigan. So naturally, it's a bit of a different balance, some different contractors, big contractors with us who've contacted us to say, we want to get involved with social value. I've done a personal kind of connection with those. So one who was a really big contractor came and saw me and wanted to help. So I put him in touch with a community organisation who did a food pantry and lots of other things. And my advice to them was go and sit in the reception area, look at what goes on and see how you can help in that. But it gets you a real feel of that. So this contractor did that. Didn't realise how things were out in the community, felt that he was quite wealthy, he'd done his stuff, but really then he wanted to get really involved in that community organisation. What that brought with it was a few difficulties along the way, where the contractor brought his business head to the community organisation, and there was a bit of a clash because he was projecting figures going forward, and they was looking at how they did communities monthly. So it got to a point where I was like in the boxing ring and separating them, and then they came together. They came to some rationale of them working together, and now that's progressed. Now I think 3 years down the road, that contractor has been working with that organisation, made a real difference. But not only in a financial way, but also in an advisory way. And that's if they want advice on tax and what have you, they ring him and he sorts that out from them and they have that conversation. So he gets a lot out of that. He also working on it for contracts. We don't forget that naturally a lot of organisations are looking for contracts from councils, but we've also got a lot of contractors who just want to help and don't think about whether they're going to do. They get the contracts. I think the other example I'll give you is I think social value shouldn't just be for communities within local authorities where budgets are strapped and actually certain areas which affect the public can't be funded. Contractors have a big part to play there. So one particular issue, I was dealing with some contractors who did pathways. We had a path which fell out of the budget remit. We couldn't get it done. It was a real link to our country park, to the canals. This contractor came in, didn't really understand social value, came in, did the work, done some work locally. They were never involved before. Now they're chomping at the bit, if you like, as we would say in Wigan, to get done more and stuff more done out there within the community. So I think there's a bit of an add on both of it. But I just think that it's so important that what we build, and I think I've done this as a councillor, but I think it's an officer role more than is building relationships with contractors, with businesses and talking to them, not just put it down on paper that you'll give so many apprentices, you'll do this, you'll do that, and nobody follows it through. So I think it's really important that you build those relationships and those people will deliver because it is so important out there. But they get something out of it. I think everybody gets something out of this. Contractors do, businesses do, communities do, and local authorities do, all by working together. So I think that's really important. But one thing I would probably finish on, Andrew, is when people are putting in for contracts and we're trying to push this through at Wigan, well, I want to know what contractors have done before they apply for the contracts and what they're going to do afterwards. It's no good them telling me what they're going to do when they win the contract. I want to know what they've done in my community before they get that contract. I think that's more important than anything else before because it shows me that they're committed to our borough and doing what's right for people.
Thanks, Chris. And actually, you made some important points there about how actually having impact can be done in a number of different ways. You can work with community organisations, you can work with councils, you can work with other organisations to have that impact in communities. But having that impact is important. And also, I really liked what you said about actually this is about everyone. This isn't just about one group or another. This is when everyone benefits is actually when we drive impact, and when we drive impact, we drive more value. And I'm sure we'll pick up some of those things as well. And before I move on to Ed, I also like your point about let's also be really clear about commitment and commitment in communities and track record, because that does matter. About how to demonstrate that people are committed. So Ed, let's move over to you. You're councillor in Westminster City Council. You're moving from kind of Greater Manchester down to London. What are your thoughts on this question about keeping social value real?
Thank you, Drew. I'm a relatively new councillor, so I was elected in 2022 and came from the finance business world. So like Chris was talking about, I'm probably one of those people who comes in and clashes a little bit with local government. But I think my primary focus is on that hierarchy of needs and getting the bottom right. So when people are living in damp, mouldy, leaking flats, I see that as far more important to sort out than some of the other areas that the businesses coming into work on projects think that is the social value that they're adding. And I think a really good way to understand that is to talk to local councillors, and you can go and embed yourself in the community, but the councillors are already there, so they're a fast track way to understanding what the issues are. So in our area, we've got to get slightly political, Labour are pushing community hubs, and actually, in my mind, that's not what the people need right now. They need somewhere warm and dry to live so they can get on with their life, and therefore delivering projects on budget and on time could be far more important than having a lot of extra add-ons to the offer being submitted. But I know that to win the contract, you've got to show the add-ons. So there might be some rebalancing needed there in what we're asking for. And a final point, it's something residents are screaming out for at the moment is legal support. The council have big teams of lawyers, and our residents don't always have someone representing them. They have it for planning, they have it for licensing, but they aren't given support when it comes to housing needs. And that is something where I think companies coming in, they already have legal expertise, they have relationships with law firms, and that's something of real value that they could offer to the community.
Thanks, Ed. And we always like people coming in and kind of challenging and clashing. So don't be afraid to say, you may be new, but actually bringing everyone's perspective to this table is really important. And again, I really welcome that perspective about sometimes there's some really basic needs in our communities that we have to address, and that we can be excited about more developmental work. But sometimes if we can't get the basics right, then actually people can't move on. And I think we've all experienced that in the last kind of 3 or 4 years, particularly with the cost of living crisis, that actually when communities are really under stress and individuals and households are massively under stress, actually we've got to work with that. We can't ignore that. That has to be part of our social value approach and the impact approach that we take. So let's move now to hear from you, Rhian. And Rhian, come in at it from a slightly different perspective, from a supplier perspective, as one of those organisations who will be sitting there, participating in procurement, putting kind of things forward as part of that, things that you're going to do, and then actually being charged with taking those things forward and being held to account for the delivery of your work. What are your thoughts on this question, Rhian?
So just to give a little bit of context, we're an SME based in Rugby and Chesterfield, and we work with organisations to deliver essential communications, either printed or digitally. So we try to do that as sustainably and responsibly as possible. So from a supplier's perspective, social values become a critical part of the business, how we operate, how we serve our customers, and we've become really good at it. As a B Corp, we have our ESG values legally written into the articles of our association, and this sets us apart from slightly bigger competitors because we're actually committed to making a difference. So one of the big challenges that we work with a lot of public sector businesses, and there can be a time lag between bidding and actually starting to deliver the contract. Sometimes it's months, sometimes it can be years, and we have to keep those promises relevant so that they actually matter to the communities when we're delivering them. At the point of when we tender, we do a lot of research to understand what the client needs, but we are aware that when it comes to delivering it, things can change, leadership, policies, priorities. So we don't assume that we know what's best and that we think we know what the customer wants. We actually listen to their needs, engage with them, and at the point of when we're delivering it, we redesign what we potentially have pledged. For example, we had a 4-year contract, and one of the pledges was to offer a 2-year apprenticeship. When we came to then deliver that, the needs had changed of the business, of the local area, of the community, and it didn't feel like a good use of our resources to deliver that 2-year contract. So we pivoted on our pledge. We didn't sort of back out of it. We wanted to deliver what we said we were going to deliver, but we spoke to the client, we understood what they actually needed at the time of delivery, and we offered programs around breakfast clubs, working with foundations in the local area to offer children experiences that they wouldn't normally get, environmental consultancy. We effectively reinvested in projects that reached more people within the client's framework at that time. So the way we've been able to do that is through strong partnerships with organisations and suppliers that have shared goals, and we've been able to adapt to it. So we're not just measuring impact. I mean, we have to provide data to the client on what we've done and how we've gone about it, but we actually look at what can deliver most value and most impact to the community. We do that through regular dialogue, conversation, relationships we build with the client. Just so that we stay closer to the community needs. We've tried to do it alongside all their frameworks, so we're constantly looking at what they're trying to deliver at the time of, when we're putting the projects in place. And I think, like Chris was saying at the start, everyone's learning this. Nobody sort of just knows social value. It's been a journey for us. It's been a journey for our clients. And I think we've found that often our clients didn't really know what they needed. We didn't necessarily know what to pledge to meet that. And through actually delivering it and measuring the quantifiable benefit of it, we've understood what matters. And now when it comes to pledging realistic projects and investment, we're able to do something that we know matters and that we can actually report on. So in terms of my key takeaways, I'd say assess the needs first, and we do that at tender stage. We do deep research into what's needed, and invest where it matters. But we're always trying to align it and keep those promises as living commitments. It's not just we pledged it 2 years ago and so we're just going to deliver what we said we were going to deliver. We actually want to make sure that we're delivering something authentic and measurable for the client.
Rhian, thank you. And you used some really important words there. Actually, one of the words you ended up there, keep it authentic, which I think is really critical. And actually, you also offered us the thought that actually we're learning about this. No one's got it right. We're all learning how we do this, how best to do it. And I would say that that's always going to be an ongoing experience in some respects. But you also talked a lot about actually things change. Things change over time for communities, but that deep engagement with communities, developing those relationships are the things that are going to keep us in good stead, because that's how we'll be alive to what impact we can make alongside them. So lots in there about how we maintain flexibility in some respects within a kind of a system that can sometimes feel a little bit rigid, if we're honest.
And I'd also just add to it as well, when Chris was saying about you want to know what we've done before, through learning and through delivering and working really successfully with our clients, we now know that when we put a pledge in, it is genuine, it is authentic, and it's stuff that we believe in.
Yeah, definitely. So, Richard, we're going to come over to you next, our final member of the panel. Richard, you kind of sit between, in some respects, the work that Rhian does. You sit and the kind of the demands coming forward from your councillors in Durham. You're the kind of the procurement director there at Durham County Council. What's your perspective on how we keep this real?
Yeah, morning everybody. That was really, really good insights, I think, from the guys already, and I think Rhian touched on that journey element, and I think that's really key, particularly from a public sector body and from a local authority as well. You've got to appreciate this. Everyone is going to be on a different stage of that journey, and some will be a little bit more mature, and some will, like we've said, will be starting out on that journey. And whatever we do, it's always in that right direction. It's always pushing forward, always making sure that we want to deliver something better, improve on what we can do to understand our communities, to build those relationships, and ultimately create a legacy, leave an impact. Again, as I know we've talked about, Andrew, before, kind of be a good ancestor, leave something. And I know that's one of your real big kind of takeaways that you want to achieve on. And we've started to look at Durham a little bit, where I've started to coin a bit of a phrase that's around transactional to transformational. So really, to start that journey, you may need to do something that feels a little bit more transactional in terms of that agreement between, the local authority and Rhian when we're doing that SME engagement. And maybe to start on that journey, you need a little bit of understanding of, you will do this, and we will give you some ideas of what that may be in terms of projects or evidenced through that local needs analysis of where we've got that real insightful data that we can actually share with bidders through that process. And again, maybe the first part is that, yeah, absolutely, it's going to be a little bit more transactional. But as we go down that path, as we go down that journey, we want it to become transformational. And we want to get out of that transactional approach and leave something actually that can be sustainable. Now, one of the things that I've always felt really supported on in Durham is that senior leadership buy-in. If you've got a senior leadership group and an administration, a political group that supports you, trusts you, and gives you that empowerment to really push that forward, then you can do great things in a procurement space, I feel. And again, we've got, you know, Ed and Chris on the call today that are saying similar things from, you know, Wigan and their parts of the world, that really they want that community impact. So as we take ourselves on that journey, it's around, for me, it's embedding something sustainable. So having those connections, building those relationships, and again, that's took us to developing the County Durham Pound anchor network that we've got within Durham as well. So the thought process around that was absolutely everyone individually is on a different part of their journey in social value. But actually there was some that maybe didn't know enough, wanted to learn a little bit more. If we then collectively came together using, like Rhian said, that local needs analysis piece, that place-based approach to understand what the community needs, you know, particularly when you're as wide as, say, County Durham, we've got really, you know, a combination of high levels of deprivation versus areas of actual quite affluency. So again, it's making sure that you target the right areas with the right needs, and then start to work collectively on that, build that collaborative piece, try to all target that same area, that same impactful need that actually the community and the place-based approach is actually telling you. Once you do that, then suddenly you start to see real change, and actually the community really see the change as well. And like you say, it gathers momentum. Once companies see that, once the public sector anchors see that, the SMEs start to buy in, you start to knit those connections together between maybe some of the larger providers, making it clear that to deliver this, they actually need to use those VCSE organizations. They need to use those SMEs, those MSMEs to actually deliver some of this stuff, because the more you can use local businesses, the more you're going to have that more local impact. You're going to keep that pound local. You're going to impact the community, the economy, everything around that. It just all starts to grow as a network and knit together. And then suddenly, in a few years' time, you look back and you think, actually, we are seeing real change now. So it's those little things on that journey that suddenly lead to a huge change. And sometimes you've just got to step back and look and go, actually, this is where we started and this is where we're at now. Look at how far we've come, and actually appreciate that little bit as well. Celebrate your success and make sure everyone's still wanting to push forward with that social value agenda, that social value movement. Because I'll be honest, once it starts, it's like a juggernaut. You can't stop it. And I think we've seen that even this morning with having, you know, hundreds and hopefully thousands of people on this social value conference over the next few days.
Thanks, Richard. That, I mean, we all want to see that juggernaut in some respects because we want that impact. But as you said, actually, it takes steps. Nothing starts on its own, and in some respects, no one thing will be enough, actually. And it is that journey, it's that legacy, as you know, that I like to talk about, which is really important. But it's also building up that momentum and actually building and building and building. And in some respects, it kind of speaks a little bit to those core concepts that should sit in our thinking around social value, around our theories of change. How do we do that? What are the things that combine to be able to deliver the outcome of the impact in those communities? So we're going to have a bit of a conversation now. We've got a good kind of half an hour for that conversation. Hopefully you've found, I mean, you've so far been absolutely fantastic in kind of using the chat. I can't even keep up with it, to be honest. There's so much going on in the chat. I've switched and had a quick look at the question and answers bit. So if you haven't found the Q&A button, that's the one that looks like the 2 speech bubbles, Q&A, and in there you can both pose questions, which I'm going to look at and take most of the questions from, and also you can vote on other people's questions. So if you like what someone has already asked, we will you can I don't know, promote it, I think is the word I'll use. But what I will also start with is that it's not a question that's been promoted. It's actually right at the bottom, and someone has said, and Lisa, you've asked, is REAL, REAL, an acronym for anything? It probably is, but not in the context of this conversation. So we'll just get that one off the table. Actually, keeping it real is actually about making it meaningful. Though I'm sure someone out of today will come back to us with what that acronym stands for, because as you all know, if you've worked in the public sector, they have an amazing ability of being able to turn absolutely everything into an acronym that no one particularly understands. The problem with that one, it's got 4 letters and usually it's 3. So the top question here in the Q&A, I think we're going to go to first, because I think the question is, would the procurement process be better if we made changes in prioritising quality and impact rather than focusing on monetary values? And then says the initiatives will then have more impact on local need rather than scored on quality. So this kind of speaks to the question of, when we're thinking about procurement and scoring for procurement, if we're overly focused on the output number, the numbers of folk who are going to have that we're going to impact on, are we missing some of the more important qualitative issues and conversations that we need to be having? Actually, I'm going to go to you first with that, Richard.
Yeah, I seen that question when it popped up. I thought, yeah, that's a good one, and it is written down the feeling of where I think professionals are starting to go with social value. I think it's like I said, it's that transactional moving towards more transformational. So again, I would argue that it depends on how good you are in terms of that procurement, your understanding of social value, where you are in that journey a little bit. But certainly over the next few years in the strategy at Durham, we're certainly focusing more on the methodology of the approach and how that's going to be implemented, rather than maybe, like you say, that monetary value that's going to be placed on it, which again, I know some models have. So very much impactful output-based focuses is where we're going to start to go in terms of Durham. And like I say, by linking up those networks and creating partnerships, and then making that available for potential bidders to understand and see, and through our website explore some of that to help them engage in terms of what that response would be, that then, and showing that connection's being made as well. I think for me, that's something that we're going to lead into next. And I do think it will improve the procurement process. I think it needs a little bit of work around the infrastructure. I think you've got to make sure that if an organisation or a bidding party that maybe hasn't worked in your area is going to come into your area, you don't want them to be too disadvantaged, and you want to encourage that. So I think that's what I mean by setting up those networks and maybe that infrastructure that's underneath the organizations that are delivering some of those key programs, those key metrics that are going to help those impacts through that local needs analysis, like Rhian touched on. If you can provide those two as part of your tender pack, then that actually makes the bidding party's job a hell of a lot easier, because it means that they've got something to kind of get a hold of, explore a little bit, and maybe they aren't doing that off their own back. They're doing that with a little bit of direction and guidance. But yeah, great question. And certainly for me, that's where I see that the next few years in terms of the targeted social value that we're going to be doing at Durham. And like I said, leaving that legacy, creating that infrastructure of real impact.
And Rhian, what about for you? So when you're kind of sitting there as an SME, looking at these, complex spreadsheets, trying to fill in numbers that come out with even bigger numbers, and you talked actually about understand the local people, understand the local organisations, really get into there. What's your thoughts on how the kind of almost the move to the number kind of slightly maybe underplays the importance of what you're talking about and the quality of engagement?
So I'd fully back everything Richard's just said, basically. I think the best results we've had are from the clients and the organisations that aren't just looking at the financials. They're actually looking at what it does for their people. They're looking at how it makes a difference. We've got some examples where we've had to make numbers match on a spreadsheet, and that process is difficult. It's a hard process to make it match. It's a hard process to renegotiate pledges when we can see they're not right. And quite often it's because we're dealing with the procurement team and we're not necessarily dealing with the end user or the contract manager that has the interest in a particular need, has that passion behind them. It kind of feels a little bit like some projects will give you great PR, but actually not deliver as much impact. And I think for us, we're looking at how to make that sort of impactful difference, and looking at the quality of what we can deliver is really important. I also agree with Richard on the partnerships and working together, part of what he was saying, because we've now built up a really strong network of foundations and charities and suppliers that we work with regularly. So we know when we put it into a pledge, we know it works. We know from an SME perspective, we've not got thousands and thousands of people in the business. We're a relatively small company with realistic budgets. We know it's cost effective. It's being spent cost effectively, but it is delivering what it needs to deliver. And from previous relationships, it's been really well received. So we know it's working. We prefer to get more guidance at tender stage if possible, because I think it does make that job a lot easier. You know, we're not sort of we're still going to do that research, but we're not plucking something out of the air and going, oh, I hope that sort of matches that priority. We know it matches a priority and we know we can deliver it then. And we also know that it makes a difference.
Thanks, Rhian. And you know, and as HACT as an organisation that provides some of these numbers and the ways to value, I completely agree that actually the number is bit of the question. It is not the only, it can't be the driver for this. And Ed and Chris, I mean, you're councillors. In some respects, you are representing, well, not in some respects, in all respects, you're representing local communities into local government, into these kind of conversations at your council. How do you find people kind of associate with or even understand some of these big numbers that sit there within procurement that seem to have driven some of the behaviours in the past? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think firstly, sorry, I'll jump in there, Ed. I don't think people understand that, but they don't want to understand that. What they want is the outcome of it. And what I think quality and cost will always be there, because naturally it's fundamental to what we do. But I think in the world of AI, everybody can fill good tenders in now and contracts and everything. So on paper, they'll look the best in the world. I just think I like sitting down with contractors like I have done, relationship. I want to see the white of people's eyes. I want to see what they're actually going to put into my community. And you can feel that when you talk to people. So if you had to have a panel of a couple of councillors and officers sat down with those people who are bidding for big money, or even people who just want to invest in that community, I think it's for them to know what we need and what they can do. And I just think we've got a few principles at Wigan, and loads of authority will have. And I keep quoting this one, so the chief exec cringes every time I quote it, because I think it was one of hers, is do the right thing. And I think in this instance is when you're dishing millions of pounds out in contracts, you've got to do the right thing for the people out there and get that money back into that community, whether it's Durham or whether it's Wigan. Keep it in the Wigan pound, and we don't mind having a bit of Durham pound as well into Wigan. We're not bothered about that. We don't want any the other way, but we'll have it the other way. But I think it's really important that you build them relationships, and I think that's fundamental to all this. I'm kind of plain speaking and say it as it is, and I've been in this game quite a long time, so I remember best value. So I've been through all that process over the years and done that. But I just think we're at a point now where people understand it more, contractors. I know it's not easy, before and after, like I said before, but actually, what does it mean for you as a business locally to get involved with that community? You already are. And whether that cost is slightly higher than somebody coming from London, I think that's what you've got to weigh up in your perspective, really.
Thanks, Chris. Ed?
Yeah, I think I'd be interested to know how much weight is being put on social value. So maybe that's a question for Richard after this, because from my perspective, it's all our money. It's all the residents' money, whether that be through their tax, their service charge, their Section 20 notice. And so as a customer, I'd be looking for someone with the strongest track record of delivering on time, on budget, and who's going to deliver for the lowest price within reasonable quality. We've got a project at the moment that's proposed for a new district heating scheme, 3,300 homes. It averages over £50,000 per flat for a new heating system. So if you're going to replace a boiler at home, you'd be looking kind of 3,000 to 10,000. To charge people 50 is kind of insane. So I just want to make sure that we're keeping it real, as it were, and making sure that we're looking at delivering the basic service for a good price without adding on too much red tape. I don't know if Richard wanted to come back on that.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think I might take the political answer in terms of saying it has to be proportionate. So I think, you know, Chris went in the opening keynote, said that they're going to move in Rotherham to 20%. Again, I suppose in the industry, we've always had that argument or discussion, not really an argument, more of a discussion about at what point does social value cross the barrier into then costing the contract money and then adding on. I know there's a couple of comments in the chat already around that and what that is. At Durham, we take an initial minimum of 10%. So our social value metric is minimum 10%. What we then want to do is we will focus more heavily on the methodology of how it's going to be delivered. So we're moving more to a higher weighting around the methodology, around that 7-8% mark, with 2% maybe around that financial measurement of the impact. Because, like I say, sometimes we use that Tom's metric for that piece of work. What we hope to achieve, though, is the information that we provide as part of that pack going forward. It starts to target the areas that we really want. And again, back to, have you done this before? Chris's, have you, can I see the whites in your eyes that you really kind of want to be here to deliver this? What we want to do is make sure that that comes through in the way that that's written. And by doing that in such a way where they've connected into the communities as well, utilizing some of the information we've given them, like Durham Community Action, using Point North, these gateways into the VCSE communities that we've, got connections with, having those built into the methodology of your approach gives me then the confidence that you understand and you're willing to work with these partners, and that is going to have a greater impact and leave that legacy that we want. It would be great, and again, you've seen, Councillor Gray this morning, who again is passionate from the reform angle as well. Really sees this at a community local level and wants to move this on even more. What we've been doing in the last few months with him has been great, because he's really grasped, a little bit like what you and Chris have got, that really wanting to impact on the community. And at the minute, I'm a bit hot in that, and I'm thinking, right, you know what, I'm going to take advantage of this and actually, well, let's see if we can grow social value even further at Durham. And like he says, take it to that next level, because that next level for me is a level that at the minute I don't think is being reached and could be a real game changer. So to go out of the question, probably between 10 and 20%, depending on what the procurement process is. But again, we've got to make sure we don't cross that line where it starts to become costs on top of the contract delivery as well, which I'm sure the procurement professionals in the room will kind of acknowledge as well.
And I might be a bit challenging in that as well, which is, as you say, that delivering social value commitments cost money. Let's be clear. And actually, we fool ourselves if we don't think that, or if we believe that this is all additional and free. It's not. But what you'll find is that people will be putting the costs for social value commitments into overheads. And actually, there's a few questions and things in the chats around how that might also disadvantage SME providers. So I think sometimes keeping it real isn't just about keeping it real for communities and for impact. It's about keeping it real on all aspects of social value. I really struggle with the concept that this is free and additional, when actually it's not. It's core. It's, if you're scoring at 10 or 20% of a contract award criteria, then it matters and it costs money. So let's just get a bit more transparent about that, I think, is where we need to get to. But Richard, while we got you, the next question down was about which I think is one for you. And I'm going to spread out these questions now because we ain't got much time left and they've got a lot of questions to get through. Is how can we find a way to move from contract to contract commitments to reduce the admin burden on suppliers and allow them to deliver longer programs that could be more meaningful and deliver greater impact? I thought I'd give that to you.
Yeah, yes, thanks. Again, another good question from Alex there. I think, again, it's back to that transactional. So the contract to contract becomes that transactional approach, which, again, it may be good for some, and I'm certainly not knocking that at all. I think that's certainly how we started at Durham, is getting those kind of quick wins, those specific projects that can be delivered through those kind of one-to-one kind of relationships that we have between ourselves and the contractor, where we want to build that infrastructure. And I think suppliers would be up for this as well, as start to create that bigger program across maybe a collective of anchors. So again, linking it back, and I don't want to talk about it too much, but the County Durham Pound is the vehicle for that. What we've tried to do is create an opportunity for suppliers to come in, and we do say it kind of doesn't matter if you've got contracts with us. What I'm interested in, a bit like what Chris says with Wigan, I'm interested in what you can do for Durham. Well, actually, we've got the university, we've got hospitals, we've got housing associations, we've got the NHS, we've got the Police and Crime Commissioner. You're going to need, or as a supplier, you'll be going for contracts for all of those organisations. So let's start to create programs wrapped around all of us. So it doesn't matter if you win a single contract, you actually become part of the bigger family of social value within those organizations. And if you can create that community, then I think that is certainly game changing and legacy creating. And I think from a supplier, you then feel committed to something. So through the County Durham Pound, we created the County Durham Pound Supporters Charter for exactly that purpose. So suppliers can learn more about what social value means, what it means if you either have a business that operates or looks to do business within Durham in some way, shape or form. You can then start to engage with another group of suppliers. And the benefit of that is it's amazing the connections that are getting made between those kind of 50 organisations that are in the County Durham Pound Partnership at the minute. And that, I think, is getting away from it. And that's how you create that programme, that network, because then it's less a little about winning that contract. It's about actually being part of something that's bigger, that then when contracts come along, you're actually in a really strong position to, because you've, let's say, down roots into that part of the world. And we know that you're committed, a bit like what Chris was saying. How do I know you're committed? You're actually working with us, irrelevant whether you've got contracts with us or not, because you see the greater good in what we're doing.
Yeah. Thank you. Rhian, I think I want to put this question to you. This comes from Fozia. And Fozia asks, how can leaders maintain authenticity in their social value strategies when under pressure to deliver quick wins or please investors?
Okay, so I think from our perspective, our senior management team are heavily behind social value. They're behind sustainability, social value, and everything that our social impact strategy entails. I think that is really important, because we're not kind of going with our begging hat and going, oh, we've got to deliver this thing in, for a few £1,000s that okay, and saying, well, what's it going to give me in terms of sales? It's about the belief behind what it's actually driving. And as I mentioned at the start, I was a bit waffly at the start of my bit, but we're a B Corp, and we have the management team are behind the B Corp. The ESG principles that we won't have as a business have been there from the start, and they are embedded throughout the business. So it's not just a case of social value. Social value now has a title, and we're having to put it in tenders, but actually Datagraphic has been doing it since day one. So I think it's about having it to make it authentic. It has to actually be part of the business. It has to actually be in the core of the business, and you have to want to deliver it to the clients. But I think part of our success in some of the projects is that the clients have actually needed it. So I think it's tying up that relationship between top down, bottom up. We're in the middle trying to deliver it, and we're all learning. And it's just to do with, for us, it's about like genuinely living the commitments and not just trying to get some headlines out of it.
Thanks, Rhian. And I want to come, I think, Ed and Chris, I want to ask you this next question, because I think this goes to a little bit at the heart about kind of the questions of social value, particularly from a local government, from the things being driven by local government. And the question is from Chidi, and they ask, does social value mean that contractors have to take on the responsibilities of the government? Who must take that first?
I mean, it does sound like it, doesn't it? And that's where I'm not sure it's always the right way of doing it. And because if you reduce the price of a contract by 10%, that's 10% more in the pocket of the people to spend on what really matters to them. And so I think we've got to be careful. And kind of what Drew was saying is it definitely costs money. I guess there must be example cases of where it doesn't cost money, but you're choosing an option to make delivering the contract in better interests of local people. So whether that is hiring a local contractor who happens to cost the same price or even less because they don't have to travel as much. There must be smaller things you can do in a contract that add social value that don't cost money. But I think it is really, really important to keep an eye on delivering value for money in the contract itself, rather than this other thing. But also, so I used to work at Octopus, and they have charities, and they had days they'd go out and help the community. And there were days we were going out and picking rubbish out the Thames, which is great, but you've got a whole load of investment minds that could be out there helping be on the resident side when reviewing these contracts, etc., that get forced on them and they have to pay for. So again, using this new heating system as an example, there's financial models to review, there's legal documents to review. Residents don't really have time to do it, maybe not the knowledge, some will have the knowledge. And so giving them support in doing that really technical, difficult work that you would do every day and understand, that could be hugely beneficial and not cost as much to the contract as building a new building or something.
Chris, what do you think to that question?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite interesting. I think really it's a partnership, isn't it? If you're going to make it a success, it's not one or the other putting it on it, but it's them honest conversations with contractors. Now, Match My Project, which we've been doing for about 18 months now, has really proved that to be like contractors coming in and wanting to do it and help. But I really think it's a bit of both, isn't it, really? We don't want contractors to come in and be saying, you know what, at the end of that, we didn't make any money and it didn't work for us, because it's got to be what's something for everybody in this. We know if you're in business, you want to make a profit, you want to pay your staff and do it, and also do the right thing. But also it's that partnership. I think it's that real conversation with people of how we work that. But Match My Projects work so well for us. Within weeks and sometimes days, we've had work in our community centres from local electricians fitting extractor fans. That's how important them kind of things are to the community. And they've just done that because they've got a few people on site, a few £100, and they've done their bit. Not looking for massive contracts or anything with the council, just want to help that community.
And I suppose actually the question is an interesting one, because it kind of asks that it kind of almost presents social value as something which is at odds with government delivery. But actually, every single penny that you are spending as a local authority or as a national government or as the Department of Defence, I could go on, actually is delivering the responsibilities of government. And I suppose what we're seeking to do with social value is ask a different set of questions, which is how do we make sure that the money that the public purse is spending is spent to best effect, is driving the best impact, and is working with the best organisations who want to be in partnership with those public procuring organisations and the local communities. And surely that's what this social value space is seeking to answer. Because actually, at the end of the day, as I said, every single penny you are spending as a local authority is actually a responsibility of government. And because if it's not, then why are you spending it in the first place? I want to flip to a different question, and Paul, you might be thinking you went over my question. I was second on the list. No, I was going to come back to you. The other bit about keeping it real, we've talked about keeping it real for communities. We've talked about keeping it real in kind of how we're accountable and how do we understand things. I think the other bit about keeping it real is this question about proportionality. So actually, in some respects, I think this is a really good question. So how does the panel achieve meaningful social value while applying proportionality principles on sub-threshold contracts, especially contracts for services that, for example, could be around £40,000? Do you have any specific approaches to low value contracts? So how do we do this social value piece with actually quite low value contracts? Maybe I'll ask that one of Rhian.
I thought you might. I didn't even know what the question meant when I first read that. So I think we do have contracts, lower value contracts that we bid for. We don't then have the budget to do the same project that we might on a larger contract, but we have found ways, and we haven't actually worked with Match My Project yet, but I'm desperate to get in there because I think that's exactly the right way to provide lower value investment to actual needs. And from my understanding of the platform, it's exactly that. And I think, but we've also found with delivering some initiatives that the smaller projects, the smaller initiatives that provide the most benefit are actually the most impactful. So it isn't just about big budgets, and it isn't just about throwing thousands and thousands of pounds at things. In the smaller contracts, sometimes you get more beneficial projects out there, and people are a bit more grateful as well, because it is something that to a charity it might seem like a massive ask, but to a business might not be quite as much, and it's certainly less than we would have to deliver on a bigger contract. So I think it's easier to get buy-in on the smaller projects anyway, and I think from our perspective we're able to get more people within the business behind it as well. If it's a local school up the road and we're helping out with something, then it makes those smaller projects more personal and a bit more meaningful.
Thank you. Well, we're going to have to kind of bring the questions to a close there, because we've only got a couple of minutes left of this session. I kind of wanted just to kind of bring together a few final thoughts. We kind of started this conversation asking the question around how do we keep it real? How do we keep social value real? And in some respects, it's really exciting, isn't it, that we are a growing community of people who are really interested in ensuring that impact is being made in the communities in which we work, whether we were there as local authorities, we're there as housing associations, as organisations providing services, or even as local people and local community organisations. This space is all about that impact that we can make. It's about the impact we make today, tomorrow, and the legacy that we leave in those communities. And surely that's the thing that gets us all out of bed in the morning. But we all have different kind of perspectives on this, and we have different roles to play in this kind of question and in this impact that we want to drive. And what's really important is around authenticity. That we kind of take the time in these conferences and in other places to have kind of real conversations about, are we doing it the right way? Are we learning from the best? Are we being bold and ambitious in what we're trying to achieve? And are we actually doing things which, at the end of the day, people in our communities are saying, yes, I have experienced that. My life feels different. I feel now that I can move on and do that in a different way. I think what's exciting and most exciting around public procurement in particular, and when social value is driven through public procurement, is that through procurement, we're not just buying stuff. Actually, what we're doing is we're creating relationships between the public sector and other public bodies like housing associations, with other organisations who can deliver great services and goods and works, but actually can also do something else with that relationship. And I think it's in that relationship and in the opportunity of those relationships that we can start to unearth even more impact together. Because when we're all driving that impact in communities, we will see benefits for people, for local government, for the planet, for our bottom lines, all of those things. So actually, in some respects, keeping it real is recognizing that we have important relationships to develop and drive. It needs to be meaningful. It needs to be authentic. And we've got to continue to challenge ourselves, challenge each other to be better, and also to do that in a way which at the end of the day drives that impact. Can you just give loads of emoji love to our panel, who have been fantastic? I hope you're going to continue to stay with the online conference, and then hopefully you'll be there in person as well for the final day. You've been a really brilliant audience who've asked us fabulous questions. Sorry we couldn't get through them all. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a really good quick lunch break and come back to all of the great sessions that are in the conference today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.